Tyre Nichols and America's systemic failure. Proposed reforms at the federal level would not have saved the life of Tyre Nichols. Only the fundamental transformation of systems of punishment that have been normalized in American society and culture can do that. The killing of Tyre Nichols, a 29-year-old black man, at the hands of the Memphis police illustrates the need to reimagine public safety in America. The Friday evening release of body cam footage and video from a poll camera has left the city of Memphis on the edge of a political eruption, with Nichols' death adding new layers of grief to a city known as much for being the site of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s 1968 assassination as for being the birthplace of the blues. Coming a little over 2 years after George Floyd's murder in Minneapolis sparked the largest social justice demonstrations in American history and a searing round of national soul-searching, Tyre Nichols' death reveals what has and has not changed since then. In the run-up to the release of the footage, many have expressed shock and surprise that all 5 officers who stopped, detained, pepper-sprayed, then brutally beat Nichols to death, were black. We should not be surprised. The police killing of Nichols should not be misinterpreted as an example of black racism but as a byproduct of systemic failure. Since 2013, the Black Lives Matter movement has called for a reimagining of public safety through redistributing the resources designed to support punishment toward investments in the mental and physical health, well-being, and safety of black communities. Memphis is a case study in the ways in which structural racism within law enforcement can impact black residents living in a predominantly black city that has a black chief of police, Saralyn Davis. The fact that all 5 officers have been fired and are facing second-degree murder charges even before the release of the video, speaks to a kind of progress, but one that is nonetheless itself racialized. Apparently, justice is much swifter against law enforcement who kill black people when the perpetrators themselves are also black. Chief Davis has been eloquent in her public statements. "This is not just a professional failing," she observed. "This is a failing of basic humanity toward another individual. If only it were that simple." The heartbreaking interviews offered by Nichols' parents, who described their son as having a beautiful soul, echo the tragedies of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, whose killing at the hands of the Louisville police in a botched no-knock raid in March 2020 came to light only after Floyd's murder, and countless other grieving black parents, relatives, family members, and communities. Nichols would be alive today if America had embraced an abolitionist perspective on punishment, prison, and policing that recognizes more of the same will only produce further preventable tragedies. Nichols' death reflects a broken system, one wherein armed police routinely turn traffic or even pedestrian stops into violent and deadly confrontations with unarmed citizens. But it is also just the tip of the iceberg. That the bloody hands of the officers are black has added new layers of pathos to this tragedy. Yet as the video shows, there were sheriff deputies and other officers who failed to intervene to save Nichols. His death, although catastrophic, is hardly a system failure from the law and order perspective still embraced by Democrats and Republicans, with both parties constantly seeking to provide further resources and funding for dead-on-arrival reforms that only serve to embolden police unions and a law enforcement apparatus designed to inflict violent punishment on criminals and ordinary citizens alike. Abolitionists imagine a world where notions of public safety are more aligned with professed values of freedom, liberty, and democracy. Investments in good schools, the elimination of food deserts, mental and physical well-being, environmental justice, jobs, drug rehabilitation, housing for the poor and at-risk young LGBTQ+ teens, domestic violence prevention for black women, and resources for survivors of sexual assault would make our neighborhoods, from Boston to Oakland, safer than the current status quo. The police killing of Tyre Nichols is tied to a long history of American institutions criminalizing black bodies in a simultaneous effort to exploit their labor and to mark them with a new badge of servitude and indignity in the aftermath of racial slavery. Slavery's afterlife surrounds us, from high rates of maternal infant deaths suffered by black women, to the overwhelming rates of black incarceration, to educational gaps between white and black students, to the persistence of residential segregation and the wealth gap. Yet the most dramatic marker of black people's status as non-citizens, even after the Reconstruction Amendments purported to build a multiracial democracy in America for the first time, has been the cheap value of black life at the hands of institutional authority. Whether those officials are white, black, or people of color is beside the point. The path forward toward a liberated future where Nichols might have lived long enough to dote on his grandchildren requires a move away toward business as usual that means having the hard conversation about abolition, one that impacts immigrants and the undocumented, citizens of all colors and backgrounds, and will have a generational legacy that finally allows America to treat people who look like Tyre Nichols with the humanity that they deserve.